George couldn't sleep after he got the news. He lay in bed, stared at the ceiling, and thought, James, 23 years old, suicide, my name in his note. His songs saved my life, but they're not enough anymore. George got up, looked in the mirror. I saved his life, and then I wasn't enough, and he died. But then another thought came. If James died, how many more are there? How many fans are listening to my songs right now thinking, this isn't enough anymore? How many more are drowning? George sat down, put his hands over his face. Am I responsible? If my songs give people hope, and then that hope isn't enough, is that my fault? Morning came. George called his manager, Paul. Do you know someone named James Morrison? Paul, no, who is he? George, he's dead, suicide. I was in his note. Paul went silent. George, Paul, how many fan letters do we get each year? Paul, thousands, maybe tens of thousands. George, and how many do we answer? Paul, George, you can't answer all of them. George, I know, but if someone asks for help and I don't respond and they die, is that my fault? Paul couldn't answer. George hung up and made a decision. He would find James's family. He would apologize for not being enough. Before we reveal what George found when he visited James's family and why he carried this guilt for 21 years, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. This is the story of a fan who needed more than music could give and the artist who never forgave himself for it. The phone call had come at 3:47 in the morning. Manchester police, a detective named Barnes. Mr. Michael, sorry to disturb you, but we have a situation. George had been asleep. Groggy, confused. What situation? Detective Barnes paused. A fan of yours, James Morrison, 23 years old. He took his life tonight, and in his note, he mentioned you. George's heart stopped. What? Who? Barnes. James Morrison, from Manchester. His note says, George Michael's song saved my life. But they're not enough anymore. Nothing is enough anymore. We're not blaming you, Mr. Michael, just thought you should know. His family might want to speak with you. George hung up and collapsed. A person was dead, and one of his last thoughts was about George, about George's songs, songs that had saved him, but in the end, hadn't been enough. George didn't sleep the rest of the night, just lay there thinking, how many James Morrisons are out there? How many people think my music is a lifeline but are still sinking? And I don't even know. I'm just making albums, touring, living my life, while people are dying, and my name is in their final words. By morning, George had made his decision. He needed to know more, needed to understand. He called Detective Barnes back. The family, James's family, can you give me their address? Barnes hesitated. Mr. Michael, I'm not sure that's appropriate. They're grieving. George, I know, but I need to speak to them, please. Barnes gave him the address and warned him. They might not want to see you. Grief is complicated. George drove to Manchester that afternoon. The Morrison family lived in a small terraced house, working-class neighborhood. George parked down the street, sat in his car for 20 minutes, working up the courage to knock on the door. What would he say? Sorry your son died and my songs weren't enough? That sounded insane, but he had to do something, had to at least try. George walked to the door, wore sunglasses and a hat, not to hide, just because he didn't know what else to do. He knocked. A woman answered, mid-50s, red eyes. She'd been crying. She looked at George, recognition slowly dawning. You're him, George Michael. George nodded. Yes, Mrs. Morrison. The woman just stared. Why are you here? George's voice shook. I'm here about James. I heard what happened, and I'm so sorry. I wanted to ask, did he ever write to me, ask for help? Anything I could have responded to? Mrs. Morrison's face crumpled. No, he never wrote. But his room was covered in your posters. He played your music constantly. And the last day before he did it, he played one of your songs over and over on repeat. George. Which song? Mrs. Morrison. I don't know the name, but it was slow, sad. James was crying while he listened. George knew which song, could hear it in his head, and his heart broke. Mrs. Morrison continued, "Why did you come here?" George: "Because I need to apologize. My songs helped him, but in the end, they weren't enough. And I should have done more, but I didn't know." Mrs. Morrison stepped back, opened the door wider. "Come in." George followed her inside. The house was small, photos everywhere. James as a child, James as a teenager, James smiling. Mrs. Morrison led George upstairs, to James's room. She opened the door, and George saw it. The walls were covered in posters, all of George, different eras, different albums, but all George's face, all smiling. Mrs. Morrison stood in the doorway. This was his sanctuary. He'd come here when things got bad. Put on your music. And for a while he'd be okay. Your voice helped him. I want you to know that. George stepped into the room, looked around. At his own face repeated dozens of times, all those smiling versions of himself, promising happiness, promising hope. But for James, it hadn't been enough. George turned to Mrs. Morrison. "Can I ask what happened? Why did James—" Mrs. Morrison sat on James's bed. "Depression. He'd struggled for years, since he was 15. We tried everything, therapy, medication, nothing worked. Your music was the one thing that gave him peace. But I guess peace isn't the same as healing." George sat next to her. "Did he leave a full note? Can I read it?" Mrs. Morrison looked at him. "Why would you want to read it, George?" "Because I need to understand what I could have done differently." Mrs. Morrison left the room, came back with a folded piece of paper. "The police gave us a copy. You can read it, but I warn you, it's difficult." George took the paper, unfolded it, James's handwriting. Shaky but legible. The note read, "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't do this, but I can't take it anymore. Every day I wake up and think, today will be different. Today I'll feel okay. But it never is. I listen to George Michael's songs. I've been listening for years. And sometimes it helps. Sometimes his voice calms me. But it's not enough anymore. Nothing is enough anymore. And I'm tired. I'm tired of trying to live. I'm sorry. I love you. And George, if somehow you're reading this, thank you. Your songs gave me 23 years. It wasn't enough, but nothing could have been enough forever. James." George read it once, then again, and again. 7 times he read it, and each time he noticed something. If somehow you're reading this. James thought George might read it, hoped for it, and George realized he sent me a message, and I got it too late. Too late to help. George looked at Mrs. Morrison. He wanted me to know, wanted me to read this. Mrs. Morrison nodded. "I think he did. I think in some way he felt connected to you, even though you'd never met." George folded the note carefully. "Can I keep this? I know that's a strange request." Mrs. Morrison: "Why would you want it?" George: "Because I need to remember that my music isn't enough, that it helps but it can't save everyone, and I need to carry that with me." Mrs. Morrison let him keep a copy, and as George was leaving, she said something that stayed with him. "Don't blame yourself. You gave James something. For 8 years, your music was his refuge. It didn't save him in the end, but it gave him time. That counts for something." George nodded, but he didn't believe her, because James was dead, and all the time in the world didn't matter if it ended like this. George asked Mrs. Morrison where James was buried. She told him, and George went there that same day, found the grave, fresh dirt, flowers from the funeral, a temporary marker with James's name. George knelt down. "James, I'm sorry I wasn't enough. I'm sorry you needed more than I could give, and I'm sorry I didn't know you were struggling, didn't know you needed help. I would have tried, I would have done something, but I didn't know. And now you're gone." George stayed there for an hour, just sitting, crying. And when he left, he made a promise. He would come back every year to remember James and to remind himself that fame, success, music, none of it was enough to save everyone. For 21 years, George kept that promise. Every June 15th, the anniversary of James's death, George drove to Manchester, visited the grave, left white roses, sat for 10 minutes, and cried. He never told anyone, not his family, not his friends, not even his therapists. This was private, personal, a ritual of guilt and remembrance. The cemetery groundskeeper noticed, year after year, the same man, hat and sunglasses, always on June 15th. But he never asked, never intruded. In 2016, George didn't come, because on December 25th, 2016, George died. And when the groundskeeper realized who the visitor had been, he understood. For 21 years, George Michael had mourned a fan he'd never met, had carried the guilt of not being enough, had returned year after year to apologize to a grave. The story of George and James is about the impossible weight artists carry. Fans see them as saviors, as lifelines. But artists are just people, making music, living their lives. They can't save everyone. They can't even save themselves. George knew this, but he carried James's death anyway, visited his grave for 2 decades, because even though it wasn't his fault, it felt like it was. And guilt doesn't care about logic. It just sits, heavy, forever. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe for more untold stories about the burdens carried by the people we thought we knew.